I always thought my husband was careful with money, until the day I discovered $97,000 in hidden gambling debt, and worse, half of it was in my name. He called me paranoid when I asked questions, but at our mortgage appointment, I handed the loan officer a folder that made my husband's face turn white. It was a crisp October morning, the kind where you can see your breath hanging in the air as you walk to your car. I was sitting at our kitchen table, calculator in hand, surrounded by listings from our realtor. Mark and I had been saving for our dream home for 5 years, and we were finally ready. "Babe, what about this one?" I called out, circling a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch. "It's at the top of our budget, but with our savings and your promotion, we could make it work." Mark walked in, holding his coffee mug, the one with "World's Best Husband" printed on it, a gift from our first anniversary. He glanced at the listing over my shoulder, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "It's nice," he said, his voice oddly flat. "But maybe we should look at something more modest, just to be safe." I frowned. This wasn't like him. Mark had always been the optimistic one, pushing us to dream bigger. Now he wouldn't meet my eyes, staring into his coffee as if it held some secret. "What do you mean to be safe? We've been saving for years. Your promotion came with that bonus. We're in great shape. Just, the market is unpredictable. I don't want us overextending." He squeezed my shoulder, but his touch felt mechanical. "I've got to get to work. Big presentation today." As he grabbed his keys, I noticed his hand trembling slightly. The front door closed, and I sat alone with the real estate listings and an uneasy feeling in my stomach. That night, I decided to update our budget spreadsheet. Mark usually handled our finances. He worked in accounting and had always been meticulous with money. But with house hunting ramping up, I wanted to be sure we were on the same page. I logged into our joint account and felt my heart skip a beat. Our savings account balance was $17,000, not the $65,000 it should have been. I checked the transaction history, thinking there must be some mistake. There wasn't. Over the past 8 months, there had been regular withdrawals, usually between $2,000 and $5,000, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking as I called the bank. "Yes, Mrs. Daniels? Those transfers were authorized using your joint account credentials. They went to an account at First National under your husband's name." I hung up and sat in stunned silence. Mark had a separate account I knew nothing about, and he'd been siphoning our house fund into it. But why? When he came home that evening, I was still at the kitchen table, laptop open, a cold cup of tea beside me. "Mark, what happened to our savings?" He froze in the doorway, then forced a casual smile. "What do you mean?" "I mean the $48,000 that's missing from our account." His expression hardened. "You checked our accounts? Without telling me?" I couldn't believe he was turning this around. "Yes, I checked our joint account." "Where's the money, Mark?" "There's no money missing. I moved some funds around for better interest rates. You're overreacting." He set his briefcase down with deliberate calm. "This is why I handle the finances, Ellie. You get worked up over nothing." "Show me," I said quietly. "Show me where it is." "I don't have time for this right now. I've got work to finish." He headed toward his office, then turned back. "And honestly, it's a little paranoid to be checking up on me like this. Don't you trust me?" The word paranoid hung in the air between us. I'd never seen this side of Mark before. Dismissive, almost contemptuous. As he disappeared into his office, I sat motionless, trying to process what had just happened. That night I couldn't sleep. Mark snored beside me, seemingly without a care in the world. I slipped out of bed and went to his office. I knew his laptop password, or at least, I thought I did. It had been changed. Another red flag. His briefcase sat in the corner. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were bank statements. Not from our joint account, but from the mystery account at First National. What I saw made me sink into his desk chair, hand over my mouth. Statement after statement showed withdrawals at ATMs and casinos, online transfers to gambling sites, cash advances on credit cards, thousands upon thousands of dollars, flowing out in a steady stream. My husband, my careful accountant husband, had a gambling problem. But it was worse than that. Tucked behind the statements was a credit card bill in my name, a card I'd never applied for, never received, never used. The balance was over $30,000. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just been gambling away our savings. He'd been opening credit in my name. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully returned the documents exactly as I'd found them. Back in bed, I stared at the ceiling, tears silently tracking down my face. The man sleeping beside me was a stranger. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Once Mark left, I began my investigation in earnest. I pulled my credit report online. 3 credit cards and 2 personal loans, all in my name, all opened within the last year. Total debt, $47,000. I'd never seen a single statement because he'd set up paperless billing to an email account I didn't know existed. I drove to our bank and spoke with a fraud specialist, then to the police station to file a report about the identity theft. I wasn't ready to name Mark as the perpetrator, not yet, but I needed documentation. I spent the afternoon calling credit card companies, freezing my credit, and starting the fraud claim process. When Mark came home, I was making dinner as if nothing had happened. "You're cooking?" he asked, surprised. I rarely cooked, on weeknights. "Thought it would be nice," I said, managing a smile. "Rough day at work?" He visibly relaxed. "The usual, nothing I can't handle." Over dinner, he mentioned that our mortgage pre-approval appointment was set for the following week. "Great," I said, pouring him another glass of wine. "I'm excited to get this process started." He smiled, reaching for my hand. "Me too, babe. This house will be a fresh start for us." I squeezed his hand and thought, "Yes, but not in the way you think." Over the next week, I built my case meticulously. I gathered bank statements, credit reports, and loan documents. I installed tracking software on my phone to record our conversations. I met with a divorce attorney who helped me secure my remaining assets and advised me on how to proceed. Most importantly, I contacted the casinos where Mark had been gambling. As suspected, he was a regular. One particularly helpful security manager provided me with surveillance images of Mark at high-stakes tables, losing thousands in single sessions. The day before our mortgage appointment, Mark came home with flowers. "What's the occasion?" I asked, arranging them in a vase. "Just because I love you," he said, kissing my cheek. "And I'm excited about tomorrow. This is what we've been working toward." I looked at him. This man I'd loved for 7 years, this stranger who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, and managed to smile. "Yes, it is." That night, I packed a suitcase and hid it in my car trunk. I transferred my personal savings, an account Mark didn't know about, to a new bank. I changed all my passwords, and I prepared a folder labelled Mortgage Documents. The next morning, we drove to the bank together. Mark was chatty, pointing out houses he liked along the way. I nodded and made appropriate noises, the folder sitting heavy on my lap. At the bank, we were shown into a private office. Janet, the loan officer, greeted us warmly. "So you're looking to buy your first home? How exciting. I've reviewed your pre-application and everything looks good on paper. Today, we'll go through your financials in detail to determine your final approval amount." Mark nodded confidently. "We've been preparing for this for years." "Great," Janet smiled. "Let's start with your credit reports." Mark shifted slightly in his seat. "We have excellent credit scores, both over 800. "Actually," I said quietly, opening my folder, "there's been a complication with our credit." Mark's head snapped toward me, eyes suddenly wary. I handed Janet a stack of papers. "These are my credit reports showing fraudulent accounts opened in my name. Here are the police reports I've filed and the identity theft claims with each creditor." Janet's professional smile faded as she reviewed the documents. "Oh my, this is quite serious, Mrs. Daniels." "What are you doing?" Mark hissed under his breath. I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "You'll also find bank statements showing unauthorized transfers from our joint savings to a hidden account, which was then used primarily at casinos and gambling websites." Mark's face had gone from red to white. "Ellie, stop this right now. You don't know what you're talking about." "And finally," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "surveillance photos from the Golden Nugget, Bellagio, and MGM Grand Casinos showing my husband gambling away our life savings, plus statements for the credit cards and loans he fraudulently opened in my name. Janet looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Perhaps you two need a moment? No need, I said. I've had all the moments I need. 7 years of them. Mark, would you like to explain the $97,000 in debt you've accumulated, or should I continue? His face contorted. You went through my things? You've been spying on me. Spying? I laughed, a hollow sound. Is that what you call discovering your husband has stolen your identity and gambled away your future?
I was going to win it back, he said, his voice breaking. One big win, and everything would be fixed before you ever knew. And the credit cards in my name, the loans, I needed stake money. My credit was maxed out.
So you destroyed mine instead. Janet cleared her throat. Mr. Daniels, identity theft and fraud are serious crimes. As a financial institution, we're obligated to report this. Mark's eyes darted between us, panicked now. Ellie, please, we can work this out. I'll get help. I'll pay it all back. I looked at him calmly. With what money, Mark? You have lost everything we had, and then some. Please, he begged, reaching for my hand. Don't do this. I love you. I pulled my hand away. I've already done it. The police have been notified. The credit card companies are pressing charges, and I've filed for divorce. His face crumpled. Divorce? No, you can't. Actually, I can, and I have. I turned to Janet. I apologize for putting you in this position, but I needed a neutral witness. And I wanted him to face at least some of the consequences of his actions in public. Mark stood suddenly, knocking his chair backward. This is bullshit. You set me up. No, Mark. You set yourself up the moment you decided to steal from me. I remained seated, hands folded on the folder. Your belongings are packed in storage. The locks on our apartment have been changed. And your parents know everything. At the mention of his parents, he seemed to deflate. They'd always been proudest of his financial responsibility, his steady career. Now they knew their son was a thief and a gambling addict. You had no right, he whispered. I had every right, I replied. You gave me that right when you put my name on fraudulent loans. Janet, to her credit, handled the situation with remarkable professionalism. She excused herself to contact the bank's fraud department, leaving us alone in the conference room. What happens now? Mark asked, his voice small. Now? You leave. You get help for your gambling addiction. You deal with the criminal charges. And you never contact me again, except through my lawyer. And you? What will you do? I stood, gathering my documents. I'm going to rebuild my credit, my savings, and my life. Without you. As I walked out of the bank, I felt lighter than I had in months. There would be hard times ahead, dealing with the fraud claims, the divorce, finding a place to live that I could afford on my own. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's lies. 3 days later, I received a text from Mark's sister. He had checked himself into a gambling addiction treatment program. Too little, too late. But at least he was getting help. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized. Most of the fraudulent accounts had been removed from my credit report, though my once perfect score would take years to recover. I found a small apartment near my office and focused on rebuilding my savings, dollar by dollar. 1 year to the day after the bank meeting, I received a certified letter. Inside was a cashier's check for $12,000. Not even close to what Mark had taken, but something. The note simply read, "The first payment. There will be more. I'm sorry." I deposited the check and added it to my new house fund. Not for a dream home with a wraparound porch, but for a small place that would be entirely mine. Secure, safe, built on truth. 2 years after discovering Mark's betrayal, I closed on a modest townhouse. As I unpacked, I came across a box of items from our old apartment. Inside was the world's best husband mug, somehow surviving the move. I held it for a moment, remembering the man I thought I had married, then deliberately dropped it into the trash. That evening, I sat on my new porch with a fresh cup of coffee in a plain blue mug. No cute sayings, no false advertising, just honest, ceramic holding, honest coffee. I watched the sunset over my small piece of the world and felt something I hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Peace. My phone buzzed with a text from my realtor. "Congratulations again on your new home. Let me know if you need anything." I texted back. "Thanks, it's perfect. Everything in my name, just how I like it." I took another sip of coffee and smiled. Mark had taught me an expensive lesson about trust, but he'd also given me something invaluable. The knowledge that I could lose everything and still rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. The mug in my hand was just a mug. The house behind me was just a house. But they were mine, bought with money I had earned, protected by boundaries I had learned to set. No one could take them from me because no one had access but me. Sometimes, the most valuable thing you can own isn't a home or a savings account. It's the ability to recognize when someone is lying to your face, the courage to walk away, and the strength to start over. Mark had called me paranoid for wanting to see our account statements. Now I check them every week, not out of paranoia, but as an act of self-care. Never again would I be in the dark about my own finances. As the stars began to appear, I raised my mug in a silent toast to myself, to my new home, and to the hard-won wisdom that had brought me here. The woman who had sat crying at a kitchen table 2 years ago, betrayed and nearly broken, was gone. In her place sat someone stronger, someone who knew her worth and would never again settle for less than she deserved. The mortgage papers on my coffee table had just one signature line, mine, and that made all the difference.